Hey y'all, Jedi here. In this video, just wanted to do a quick overview of the rare champions that I've leveled up, let you guys know which ones I think are worth it. So for the most part in this game, when you're building your teams, the rare champions in this game are actually pretty decent. The way I use them is to plug into teams where I'm weak at, like areas I'm weak at on my teams, to get the extra that I need out of them. So we'll just go down the list, starting out with this Imperial Warrior. She's a Frost champion. I had built her out a while back to kind of pair with this Epic here to try to build a little bit of damage for my Frost teams for some of those end-game contents where you need a full set team. This champion, she's actually pretty good. She's good at laying down damage, especially if you pair her in Frost teams. To give you an example of how good she can be compared to these other ones. Now she's completely scrolled out. My epic here is not. Basically, I made a vortex team where I use Muddy Demon, Voresh, my new legendary, and then Hixandra is my healer. And then what I did was I plugged her into the team and tried her out using the same gear as what I was going to use with him, and then I plugged him to the team. So that way they had their little synergy with him using Frost, and she actually did more damage than my epic. Now, I will say he does not have scrolls, and it was not a whole lot more damage. It was like 10% more. So with scrolls, he'll probably end up beating her out. But it does show that for rare champion, she can put out good damage. If you need that plugged into a Frost team, she's a good one to choose. Now, as far as, is she like an S tier rare? No, she's a good rare, but she's not like the best. But she's definitely one, especially when you first start playing. If you need a damage dealer, you can build up and use. Now this guy, Quarion, this dude is a very good rare. I will say for rare healers, they're all pretty much S tier rares. He plugs into a good niche into my teams. So for the fire radiant teams, which for this season radiant is with the fire, there's not really much in healers other than him and Imperial Warrior, which is a common. And then also he gets this defense up on his last one, which helps a lot. So I will say, like, I would throw this guy in my PvP team, and my PvP team does great with him. I used him when we got to the end game stuff. Basically, it would be him, my adventurer, Eric, my tank, and then sometimes Dane. Sometimes I'd switch people out depending on what's going on, but usually Dane. Yeah, he would keep that defense up, which would generally end up being what kept my team alive. When I wasn't using him and I used only Imperial Warrior, she wasn't healing them fast enough and they were dying. But with him, with the defense up, it was giving him time to get around to his heal as well, and he was keeping everyone alive. So really good. He works really good in a few of the dungeons. Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're starting a new account and you need a healer, you're going through this list, you're trying to pick out who to level up. If you're building a team that involves Radiant teams, pick this guy up to start with until you get a good epic or legendary to replace him. Now, I do think in going to list this list of characters on here, the epics and the rares and the commons who do healing are very good to have, because you'll see stuff like in here. There's not really much of a healer in here. I know this guy has like a revive, which I don't even have him unlocked yet. Pretty sure it's him with the revive. See, I don't think this guy has a heal either. No. So whenever you're doing a radiant team, he's really one of your only options for a healer. So he's definitely good to do along with Imperial Warrior there. So when you guys are building your teams in this new season coming up, do not overlook your rare and common healers. Now, going next in line, we have Irina. Now, as far as Irina goes for a damage dealer, rare, she's definitely S tier. Now, of course, she does get outclassed when you start getting up in the higher ones. I have this epic that she's kind of similar. They're both doing an attack penalty. They're both attack champions, but this one gives you an aura. She does more damage than Irina. Of course, she's an epic. She should. But from starting out, when I was first using Irina, she was a really good like help in some of the dungeons when I needed to get that decreased attack down on people. She's good because she's a rare. She has the attack penalty 2. I think she's the only rare who has that. So you can build up her accuracy, keep bosses attack downs, and it helps. Or you could build her up for damage, and she plugs really good into a lightning team for damage. So I would say when you're also first starting out on this next season, if you didn't play this season and you don't have these epics and legendaries unlocked, you don't have any unlocked, she's a really good damage dealer to consider, especially because she's versatile. You can add some accuracy and you can get that out of her. Now, Hixandra, there's really so much you could say about this champion. This is an epic for sure, disguised as a rare. Close to a legendary. I mean, of course she's not a legendary because legendaries in this game are completely broken and super overpowered, but Hixandra's worthy of being an epic for sure. I still use her in my teams for heals. She's pretty much the best healer you can get without having a legendary. With her being rare, she's easy to scroll out and get these leveled up. So you're getting your 20% plus all of this, which you're getting another 30%, so 50% healing on your people. I mean, plus on this one, you get the single heal that dispels a debuff. Using her in Graver Rot, she's super clutch for that. Using her in Feywild, she's helping keep a little bit of the debuffs off. Now, it's not enough of a cleanse to like completely be keeping your team healed up, but if you play it right, depending on how you build resistance on your team, she could be what keeps your attacker alive. Her aura, she gets that enlightenment. This pairs good with other poison heroes because they get the extra damage based on their enlightenment from the derived damage. Or if you have a team that does extra derivative damage. I don't really use her in a team that does derivative damage, so her aura doesn't do too much other than sometimes she's the only one with an aura and it boosts her own heals off of this one. So it's still nice that she has it. But when you guys start, she was free in Season 0. It's probably going to be the same in Season 1, not for sure. But even if not, you'll unlock her pretty quick. Hixandra is an epic disguised as a rare. Definitely use her. Now we're going to move on to Imperial Warrior. She's not a rare, but she's going to be in this list because she's basically epic also. She's comparable to like a Hixandra. So for her, you can't use any scrolls because she's common. But this heal here, she heals allies by 25% of their max HP. This heal is insane. I used her, really she ended up coming clutch in one dungeon in particular. Sorry guys, I haven't been playing in a while, so I keep forgetting some of my stuff. But coming into here, Grave of Venom. My Grave of Venom team, she came clutch. She kept my tank alive. I'm sure these dungeons might change up a little bit when the next season starts, but just to give you an example, the way this team worked before, I wasn't using him. I was using Imperial Warrior. Actually, I was using mostly healers, so instead of Dane, I had healer. Actually, I had a healer, and then I had a damage dealer in my tank. When I first started this, before my gear was any good, it was terrible gear. You could keep her in low gear. She would tank the hit from this one. She would keep your tank healed along with your other healers, and you could power through this dungeon. So she was pretty insane for this dungeon. When I went on to doing just my fire teams, she was clutch as a fire team healer. I mean, she's just really good. For a common, definitely don't sleep on her. She was amazing. Definitely like her a lot. Now, so far out of all of these that I've showed off, the healers are probably the best ones. They're the most important. They plug into your teams the best because usually you can unlock a few damage dealers that are a higher rarity. So like really, like instead of Irina, if you pull a damage dealer up here, it would be better to use a damage dealer and pair them with one of these healers than it would to be to try to get some other type of healer paired with a damage dealer. And even then, inside of your epics, there's not a ton of healers, so it shows how good they are. Because like there we got tank. See, none of these guys have heals. The support guy, no heals, which he's still pretty good. Vordesh has heals, but he only heals one target at a time, so it's nothing AoE. He helps. He's actually more of an attacker, and then the heal is kind of an extra bonus. She's got heals, but she just heals herself. This one has a few heals, but it's also very weak and doesn't really do much for you. I remember. Yeah, so she heals the lowest HP ally with invisibility. But like I said, her heals are nothing crazy. And then Muddy Demon, he's the only healer that's really good that I have out of the epics. So really these rares came in clutch for me because they filled in a slot that I just didn't have going for me. Now, coming down here, these ones that I didn't fully level up were kind of the ones I played with that weren't as good. Now, Megan here, her kit is kind of similar to Quarion's, but not as good as his. So, Megan, she gets that defense up, but instead of a straight heal, she does a recovery over time. In my experience in this game, the recovery over time can be okay if you have lots of champions who do it on the same team. They do stack, so that helps. But it takes too much time to recover sometimes. So your people are taking damage. The recovery over time isn't healing them as fast as they're taking damage. So they still end up dying if you don't have the extra healer or something plugged in the team. Then she has this one. She gets their max HP and recharges the ultimate energy by 25%. It sounds really good, but when it's only hitting one champion, it's really not doing a whole lot for you. Now, I will say early game, I used her a little bit in some of the dungeons. But as we moved on, she just phased out. She wasn't reliable over time. So, for instance, the very one that I just showed, Grave of Venom, I had her in there in the early levels. I was trying to get her to build a Necro team, but by like stage 5, she just wasn't keeping up. Grave of Curse, I used her for the defense up. It actually worked really well in there because she has that 30% defense up. But I switched her with Quarion. His heals were much better, and she just became unusable in there. So she's a decent rare early game if you don't have anything else. She's good to try out and use. If you don't have Quarion, you can start with her, but she's not really worth the resources in my opinion. I'm now going on to Anna. Anna's pretty good, but also super niche use. I basically would only use her if you need her for the niche use of her cleanse. So this one grants recovery over time, which, as I just explained, that's okay, but it's not very good. Now, if this was a heal, she would be a million times better. But recovery over time, it's not a direct heal. It's not as good. And she dispels one debuff from everyone. So a few areas where that helps is like Grave of Rot and Feywild. She has good niche use in there. Now, her issue in Grave of Rot is that if you're building her as a cleanser and you're not building anyone else with the resistance, Grave of Rot will drop like a poison cleanse and a heal reduction cleanse, or a heal reduction debuff and poison debuff. And she'll only cleanse one off of each champion. So if she cleanses the poison and not the heal reduction, then people tend to die because they can't get healed. But if she cleanses the heal reduction and not the poison, her heal isn't enough to make up for the poison damage, and so you need another healer in there. But also that's random, so you would have to have someone else who's helping out with cleanses in order to actually keep the debuffs off. So you still need to build some of your champions in there with enough resistance to not take them, which then kind of mutes the point that she heals or cleanses the whole team. So she can be useful if you play your cards right, but she's not super amazing. Now, early game, she's really good for those dungeons. It helps out a lot. As you get into later game, it's just better to have resistance than to have her cleanse. So overall, I'd say she is a good rare. I don't entirely regret building her. If I go back, I would never take her past level 90. And once you break 90, it's just a lot of resources. And some of these that you see, 96, 98, it's because I just didn't feel like they were worth getting up any higher. Now, getting into Eli, he was a decent poison damage dealer. I did like him. I know there's other people who liked him a lot more than I do. and who used him a lot more than I do. I just didn't find him to be super great, but to be fair to him, my first two epics I pulled were Voresh and Dane, who deal lots of damage, so I didn't really have use for rare damage dealers, which is why there's not too many built on my account. Um, he does have this attack aura, which is good. If you have Hexandra, which you should have, he pairs well with her. She gives that extra enlightenment on her aura, and he gets derived damage from his poisons. So he's good for that. I would say if you don't have a damage dealer at all, he's good to build. I wouldn't push him up past 90 as as you pull shards, you're going to pull an epic who does good damage. Most epics in here have some type of damage in their kit. So he's going to end up getting outscaled later in the game. So he's good early on, not good later on. Now coming down, Notera, she was a free one that you get. From here on out, most of these I didn't build. I did some of them on the test server, not very many. I just didn't have a reason to use a lot of them. So I went over their kits and kind of judged for me if they were good or not. She was in my teams in the early game, all the way up to around the level 70 content. I just felt like she was falling off a lot. So for me, she was not that good of a champion. However, I did have someone in my clan who carried her all the way through the final dragon fight for the purple dragon, because on her ability here, you can control where she hits. So they stacked her out with a ton of damage, and you would use it to hit the golem that was giving the boss the invincibility to take out the golem quick. So she does have some niche uses for stuff like that. I would just say as the game goes on, she fell out and just didn't become worth it. Now this guy, there's a good reason why I didn't build him. His kit sounds pretty good. Gets defense up recovery to himself. He does this attack penalty down. He gets the chance to reduce damage, so he would be a great tank. The reason why I didn't build him is because Horus was free. Horus's kit is better. Horus is epic. He's easier to build. So as cool as this one could have been, he's just super outshined by the fact that we got Horus for free. In season 1, not sure if they're going to give the same champs for free or not. If they don't give Horus out and you don't pull Horus and you need a tank, one of these two guys right here would be good, but this guy would replace Horus for sure. But same thing for this guy. He had a kit that seemed like it would be interesting. He gets the sun, gets a little bit of damage on him, but seemed like he was there for tanking. And I built Horus and just didn't need either of these two for any of the early game. And then when we hit late game, I had Horus and Mighty Demon as my tank, and I just had no reason to build them. Netta here, I didn't build her because I don't have wild champs to pair her with, but for this one I will say that I have people who have other wild champs in my clan that use her as like a plug-in. So if you have like the epic lizard, I'll show you real quick, get into the gallery, which I don't have. It's one of the only ones I don't have. If you have this lizard for the wild champion, you beat the story, you get Eric, who's also wild. Then you can plug Netta into a team with the two of them, and then add 2 healers, and you have, or add 2 supports, 1 healer, 1 whatever, and then you have a really good wild team. She pairs really well with them. But if you don't have the other wild champions, she's not really worth building. I would say you have to have her to pair with other wild to get any like really good use out of her. Outside of that, her kit doesn't really mean much because everything for wild champions is about syncing up with the other wild champs. Now this guy, I built him on the test server. He was decent. Going back, I'm glad I didn't build him because he didn't seem like anything too special even then. So to me, really not too much worth it. These ones I'm going to go through pretty quick just because I didn't build them. I don't have too much information other than why I didn't build them. This guy is rally champion. Rally team seem to be one of the more weaker teams, although they can still be good. So if you're plugging him into a rally team, okay. If not, not worth it. This one, I think there was someone who was pairing her with Enna in one of the dungeons, and she was pretty decent. Let's see, maybe it's not this one actually. Yeah, it's not this one, but Never mind. She's wild also. If you're building a wild team, you could plug her in. Might be okay. Nothing I think is too crazy. Really, for the rest of these, I'm not going to go through them. The main thing is looking at what do they do. Oh, this is the one I'm thinking of. So this one does buff immunity. Her along with Irina it was. So use Irina with the decrease attack and her with the buff immunity. And then you could go into your dungeons over here. When into Grave of Curse, you would use Irina to drop the attack on the boss, and then use that rare to do a buff immunity on the boss, so the boss couldn't buff himself, so you didn't have to worry about having to cleanse off the buffs. And then you could end up with a team that had good synergy to keep the boss from having that big shield on them. So if that's something you're trying to do in your early game, it's worth doing. But I would say late game it falls off. It's not going to be very good at all. For one, these rare champions are hard to keep alive in the harder dungeons, and on top of that, all the accuracy and stuff you require, by the time you start getting all that up on these, you're going to have champs who do the same thing but better, like a Dane or Voresh or someone, which is why I never used her. She does that buff immunity, but Voresh also does that, so I didn't need it. Also buff immunities to prevent them from buffing. Dane takes off buffs, so I never needed her. But for all these champs, you just got to go through, and if you're building a particular team, like if you're building a Frost team, you need an extra Frost champion and you don't have the epics, this guy might plug in well. I do think that this Imperial Warrior would be better than him, but you just kind of compare their kits and see which one you feel like would work best for you. Just going through all of these is kind of the same. Like I said, most of these that I didn't level up, I don't think they were very good. They may be decent. Some of them may have a few niche uses if you read through the kits, but as you pull champions, they're all going to get overshadowed by the epics. So for the most part, these ones I built, I would say, are more of the essentials. Like even when the next season comes around, I'm going to build Hixandra. Definitely 100% worth it. Like, no doubt going to build her. I'm going to build Imperial Warrior. And I'm going to build Quarion, because you need those heals on the team. So all of these rares and this common that do heal, they're 100% worth it when you're looking at your teams. And then, like I said, as you pull, just figure out what you need to plug into those other teams and go from there. So anyways, now I'm just kind of blabbering on. We're going to end the video. Hope this helps some of you guys out. Y'all have a good one.